listening to Planet Vero Radio. I am Cindy Schwartz. We are broadcast on iHeartMedia, and we are also broadcast on Spreaker. I've got my co-host Jeannie Roller with me on Skype today, and we're talking about what the actual effects of PTSD are for medical patients that have been traumatized and abused, because a lot of times the information out there is about, and no disrespect to any of that, to veterans and to different other categories, and it really doesn't ever get talked about in the medical community. Everyone knows about it. You know, the doctors certainly know about it. The counselors and stuff know about it. I've got a paper in front of me that I found on counseling.org, and the name of the article is When Treatment Becomes Trauma, Defining, Preventing, and Transforming Medical Trauma. And that's what it talks about. It's written by two counselors, and it's got different entities in it on why patients would necessarily have this happen to them, why they would be traumatized when other patients aren't, and why patients just overall would be traumatized. And some of it is definitely some of the subjects that we talk about all the time is informed consent and also medication. And those are two huge things. The informed consent is one big thing, and it's kind of a yin and a yang situation with that, where if you tell the patient too much stuff, maybe that patient won't consent to the surgery. But if you don't tell the patient enough stuff, then they won't consent to the surgery. So I kind of get some of that stuff. But the bottom line really in this paper is that the communication needs to happen. And we've talked about that many, many times, Jeannie, you and I, that you sit in the room with the doctor, you maybe have, I should say, the verbal informed consent, and they rattle off. In my case, he rattled off a couple of things that really didn't make kind of sense to me. And he said, "Do you understand it?" And I said, "No, not really. I have more questions." And he got him instantly mad. My particular surgeon did. And that was basically the end of the discussion, because he was just there to rattle it all off. And to me, facing a serious operation, my nerves at that point were just jumbled, because I was facing a surgery that I could potentially die from, which any surgery you can. And it was just amazing to me how I wasn't getting help from these people, and they just kind of relegated it to their normal day-to-day occurrences. We do this every day. You know, we know what we're doing, blah, 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 blah. And we know what all this stuff is. And, you know, here's a little paper right here, and that's good enough for you. Which it isn't good enough for me. It wasn't good enough for me. Maybe for some people it is. And I'm just wondering your thoughts, Jeannie.
Well, yeah, I mean, mine and my husband's PTSD stems from no consent, no informed consent. And for him, what he remembers they did to him, how they intentionally harmed him. And mine comes from seeing them intentionally harm him. So, yeah, I mean, it can come for different reasons. I don't think, for us personally, we can be given too much information. I'd rather be given too much than none at all. Mm-hmm. But, you know, and I think you too, Cindy, you experienced the medical harm they were doing to you that went beyond informed consent or lack of. It is how they deal with you as a person, as a human being, that can cause a lot of the PTSD.
Right, exactly. And so we're talking about the actual PTSD for listeners that don't know what PTSD, and some people do say, I know there's some people that I've met that say, oh, yeah, everybody's got PTSD now. Well, maybe to a certain extent, but I doubt that. I mean, don't make light of the stuff that people really suffer from. And some of the things is you can just physically feel your nerves just be on panic, anxiety to the utmost edge. You'll go 2 or 3 days, 4 days without much sleep, if any sleep at all. Your mind is constantly jumbling around all these different occurrences that you saw happen, you felt happen, you were in the midst of it happening, and you want to try to rationalize it, and you can't. I mean, that's right. What my mind did. You cannot rationalize that your own doctor and your own doctor's staff did this to you. to me, it's the same as your family member doing some heinous thing to you, or your minister, your clergy, any of those type of people that you have supreme trust in, and you should, rightfully should, I believe. Teachers, different people that have those important positions in people's lives, and they've just obliterated that, and you are relegated to, my opinion, being a subhuman, and it just skews your whole nervous system. It just does. I wouldn't wish it on anyone. I really would not.
And the thing about the medical that makes it different from maybe your minister or a teacher is that you allow them to render you helpless.
Well, you have to.
Because of that trust.
Yeah, you have to. Yeah.
And that is probably, to me, that makes it that much worse, because you do not have the ability to protect yourself or say stop. My husband can remember them doing all that stuff to him, but he wasn't able to make them stop.
Right. And so go ahead.
And for us, we see triggers. We can be sitting in our living room watching TV, and the medical profession will come right in there. We can't keep them out of our lives. So it is very scary to have medical PTSD, because it is something you can't get away from.
Yeah. Here's a quote, too, from that same article, When Treatment Becomes Trauma, Defining, Preventing, and Transforming Medical Trauma. It says here, according to the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, trauma is direct personal experience of an event that involves actual or threatened death or serious injury, with a response involving fear, helplessness, or horror. And you've said that exactly. I mean, in my case, that's exactly what happened. I saw it. I tried to stop it, and I couldn't, because they put more drugs in my IV. So when I wanted to get up and leave, they wouldn't let me.
Right. Well, my husband remembers just laying there, not being able to move, not being able to speak. And he remembers them doing things to him, the sexual things, that he could not stop.
Right. And the same is in my case. I mean, I saw it, but you can't stop because you're so overloaded with drugs, and no one helps you. Yeah, I remember asking for help, and no one helped me. They didn't. They just kind of jeered at me and laughed at me like, what's your problem, blah, 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 blah. And that's what PTSD and medical trauma does to people, and you're not ever going to get over it.
No, you're not. You can control it to a certain extent, but then there are times that it happens, and it comes out of the blue.
Right, the triggers. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely, the triggers. Yeah.
We pretty well know what our triggers are, anything medical. And even knowing that, you can't stop it from happening. And it is just horrendous.
It is. I totally agree with you. And here's another quote from that. It says, medical trauma, while not a common term in the lexicon of the health professions, it is a phenomenon that deserves the attention of mental and physical health care providers. That's another cog in that wheel. Trauma experienced as a result of medical procedures, illnesses, and hospital stays can have lasting effects. I mean, that's an understatement when you have such horrific care that you just cannot rationalize. And I use that word again because that's, to me, the forefront of my mind. I cannot rationalize that human beings did this to another human being. I can't.
Right, I can't unsee what I saw happen to my husband. He can't unsee and unfeel what they did to him. He never, and I never in our wildest dreams ever thought that medical people could be so harmful.
Right, and capable of it. Yeah. Absolutely capable of it. I'm going to say, we have like 30 seconds left, Jeannie. I'm going to say thank you to Misty Roberts. She's one of our patient partners. She is on patientmodesty.org. Jeannie Rollo, you're on Twitter at Rights4Patients with the numeral 4. And we're going to keep having this conversation because it's reality and we're telling our truth. Please stay tuned and listen to Planet Vero Radio. We'll be right back.